Welcome to today's episode of Words of the Wise. Today I have Chief Hodges from Banner Elk PD in North Carolina. He has 23 years experience in law enforcement. Welcome to the show, Chief Hodges. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for the opportunity.
Of course, give us a little bit of background. How did you get started in law enforcement? Why this career path?
Like most kids, I had a dream when I was very small because of interactions that I had had with police officers to become a police officer. Um, my life as I got out of high school changed a little bit, and I actually was an accounting major in college for about 3 years, and then realized that was just not for me. That I wanted to go into the field of law enforcement. 2001, just before 9/11, I started BLET and was actually in basic law enforcement training when 9/11 happened,
Wow.
and pretty much how I started.
Do you think because you had positive interactions with police when you were young and that inspired you to enter into this profession? Do you think that you've held on to that and that's something that you try to emulate now in the community to, be a positive influence and, inspire the younger people of your community?
Absolutely. One of my favorite things about the job is being able to have those positive interactions with children. Unfortunately, most of the time when we get called to a home, uh, we don't get called for Sunday dinner. We get called because things are bad, and they see us in a negative light because of that. Um, we're taking mom or dad away to jail because they're not getting along. So they never get that positive interaction with a police officer. So being able to give those children in our community those positive interactions, that we are not the bad guys, we're human. We see them, because we are in a very small community. We see them in the stores and we see them around town walking, and they see us with our families and we see them with their families. And it's so gratifying to me that a child will come up to you not working and say, "Hey, I know you. You're that police officer I saw at my school or at whatever event." And we try to work really hard on having those interactions with children and their families. And it also makes our job safer because those children are with their parents sometimes when we see them in public, and the parents are familiar with us, and they know that the children are familiar with us and have a almost a relationship of sort with us that is positive. So if we have to go to the home, I
Yeah.
think it makes our job safer because that parent is like, okay, that's that police officer that my child was talking to 2 weeks ago in the grocery store, and we had a good positive interaction there.
Yeah, I actually think that's a really good point that you make those deposits early so that when something does happen, they already know who you are and there's that trust when you show up. I will tell you, I came from a childhood with domestic violence. I know what it's like to be that kid who's terrified and my dad is being put in handcuffs and taken to jail. I did not see you guys or police in a negative light, even though it was scary and it was um, sad and all the things as a kid. The scariest moment was in the moment of the domestic violence, right?
Sure.
And so you guys coming and helping was something that was positive. And so I wanted to maybe spread that message too, because yes, you guys are coming in some of the hardest times, but at least from my perspective, when I was a kid, it was you guys were coming to help me, during that time. And so I think that sometimes maybe you don't realize the impact that you have, even in the bad times, there can be some positive light and influence during those times. And I think it was confusing for me as a kid, because like it was scary and it was sad. And of course, I didn't want my dad to go to jail, but I also didn't want my dad to, kill the person that he was dating in front of me. And those things were like really real to me, And so I just wanted to maybe share that message that even in the bad times, you can be a positive influence. And that was
Yeah,
my experience.
And in my career, I've had those opportunities where I have saw that out of children.
Yeah.
One specific that comes to mind was a very small, probably 4-year-old boy. We go into a domestic, very, very horrific domestic. And once we got the dad removed from the location, every step that I took, the child was with me, just in my hip pocket. Every step that I took, he was right there with me.
Yeah.
So I've actually seen that in my career of how the child will have a positive interaction with an officer on a scene of a bad domestic.
Yeah.
But you also have the parents who will say, "You see that police officer? If you don't straighten up, I'm going to have him arrest you." And
Mm,
we try to stop that. And in domestics, a lot of times in the past, I have seen that children, when the father gets out of jail, the father will come and have all the negative things to say, and
mm,
it changes that perspective afterward. So
understood.
in the immediacy, it was positive, but then the parental influence changes that positive into potentially a negative.
Yeah. You and I had talked a little bit beforehand and about community support and being involved in the community and community policing. And what do you think, what steps do you think that, and this is maybe a twofold question, on, the law enforcement side, what are steps that maybe you guys are taking or that you would suggest taking in order to um, gain more of that community support? And then on the community side, because I do think it's a partnership, what are some things that you think maybe the community needs to see or needs to know about you guys so that there is that, humanization of the badge?
So I think one of the most important things we can do as police officers is get out of our car.
Mm,
A lot of times I think the car is an intimidating factor to, if you're sitting beside the street, just watching traffic go by, doing whatever you're doing, writing a report, whatever, people might walk by and throw their hand up in a wave, but that's all you're going to get. They're not going to come up to your car and have a conversation with you. If you're out walking in your streets, in your park, wherever, in your stores, people have the opportunity then to see that you're not in your office per se, and it's not intimidating for them as much to come up and have a conversation with you. I think a lot of times police officers are stuck in their cars, and we are stuck in our cars a lot. We're fortunate in our community that we are able to do a lot of foot patrols and get out of the car and build those relationships. But the same folks that you can get out of your car and speak to will not speak to you if you're in your car.
mm,
I've experienced it myself that you can have a conversation and know someone pretty well. But if they see you in your car, they will walk right on by and not stop and say hello. But if you're out of your car, they will. And as far as for the public, it's just we're human beings. We are just doing a job. If you're an accountant or you're a banker or whatever you are, it's just your job. At the end of the day, we all go home and have families and do the things that you do. It's just a job. And there's a lot of things have happened over the last several years that make us not look good in the media. And some of that is self-inflicted. I realize that. But at the end of the day, we're just human beings doing a job. And just like every other human being, we have faults and make mistakes.
I am a huge proponent for tactical advice, and I really appreciate that initial like stepping out of your vehicle because to me, like I never even thought of that. I haven't had this as a conversation on the podcast yet. And I could see how that is maybe like a barrier or a shield, where there's that disconnect from the community or the public. And so I appreciate that tactical advice of like maybe step out of the car to have more of those engaging interactions with people. I also appreciate the reminder because I do think that people forget that you do have lives. And when you go home, your mom or dad or husband or wife, and you have dreams and goals and aspirations and you have feelings and, things are hard and you feel stress. And, I think that sometimes that is often forgotten, especially when you start to see things in the media and, social media is tough right now, I think, with all the opinions. And so, I think sometimes you do forget that. So I appreciate the reminder. I know that, you have been in this career for over 20 years. I would imagine that you have experienced a lot. You've seen a lot. You've dealt with a lot. Was there ever a time in your career where this job or this career took a toll on your mental health?
Absolutely. Uh, anybody that's been in this career very long has had something that has affected their mental psyche. It's the way the job is. A couple of times we lost a child doing CPR on a child and lost him when he was not much older than my oldest child, just a few months apart in age. Hit me really hard. Um, we did a debrief, me and the medics, just the three of us over breakfast one morning.
Mm,
And having peers that you can talk to is vastly important. Um, Having peers that you can talk to is vastly important in any job. But in emergency services, I think it's more important to have folks that you can talk to and just work things out amongst your peers. But then there's also another time when I was a late learner in college, and I was married, one child, one on the way, and a senior in college, and working full time as a patrol
wow.
officer, switching from days and nights. And I almost didn't finish my last semester of my senior year in college because I was at a point where I was burned completely out. Um, and had to go seek some help. And I encourage everybody, especially my employees, I encourage them all the time. If you need help, get help. I'm here for you and will be here for you through everything that I can. But if it becomes something that I can no longer help you with, please talk to somebody because I think in law enforcement specifically, there's been a stigma that we're tough men and women. We don't talk to people and we don't seek help. We are the helpers. And that's not the case. I mean, we're like I said, we're still human beings and human beings are not built to take in all of the things that we have to take in and just keep moving on.
Yeah.
I think that, having a good mental health relationship with yourself is the only way that you can provide help to others. If you're not there mentally for yourself, you can't help others through their hard times.
I agree. And you are tough men and women, but talking to people and getting help when you need it does not negate the fact that you are strong or tough. That doesn't take away from that. And I think that's where that stigma comes in, where
Mhm.
you're thinking that if you do need to offload some of those things, then all of a sudden you're no longer tough or strong. And
Yeah.
I actually think the opposite to be true, that having the courage to prioritize yourself and to, ask for help when you need it makes you even stronger and more mentally tough because now you're doing the hard work. Because it's easier to not deal with the things. It's harder to like take that path of wellness and to talk about it and to move through it. I agree that having conversations is really impactful. And, this conversation about burnout has actually happened a few times recently in my life with people who I know, in the community. And it's honestly really refreshing when you start talking to people who, like you said, are peers or people who have your best interests in mind, and asking them like, how are you doing? Like, how are things going? And asking like specific questions, not just pass by questions, because I think that they're different. And having someone look at me and say, you know what? I'm actually just really burnt out right now. And I just feel like I don't even know why I'm doing what I'm doing anymore.
Yeah.
And then me to be like, whoa, okay, that's a normal reaction. Like other people also feel burnt out sometimes and also feel really stressed and also feel like they don't want to get up and do the thing. Wow, like that
Mhm.
makes me feel better. That makes me feel normal and like a normal person. And so I do agree with you. I think having those conversations is really powerful. It helps you to feel like you're not alone, but just because you need to talk about something or you need resources for yourself does not negate the fact that you are strong or tough.
Yeah. Yeah. In my career, I've watched a lot of folks go through that burnout period, and it generally happens somewhere between that 8 and 12 year mark.
Hmm.
You're almost a third of the way in North Carolina. We've got a 30-year retirement, so you're almost a third of the way. And you're like, is this really where I want to be? Do I want to be somewhere else? And then once they get past that 12, 15-year mark, you see it come back because then they've gotten promoted a couple of times and they've gotten some experience doing some other things and they get that drive back if they can make it through that hard 4 or 5 years there around that 10-year mark.
Yeah. Yeah, I've heard different time frames with law enforcement. Some say it's like 3 to 5, some say it's like the 8 to 10. So I think that the pendulum always swings as long as you're willing to like keep going. Like the one thing that was taught to me by a mentor one time was just don't give up. Whatever it is, there's always going to be seasons, there's always going to be waves, there's always going to be peaks and valleys, but just keep going, keep moving, obviously in a healthy way. Like there are ways that you can have that longevity and you can, make
Mhm.
sure that you're not just like shoving things down and trudging through the trenches, but, this idea of like, just don't give up, whatever you need to do to take care of yourself and to keep moving forward. I
And
wanted to,
I think, I'm sorry,
oh, go
I
ahead.
think that a lot of times that pendulum swinging depends on years it takes to get vested in the state retirement system or the local retirement system, and also the length of time of the career total.
Mm,
Um, I, I know some guys from Florida. We have a lot of folks that have second homes here from Florida, and talk to a lot of guys, retired law enforcement guys. The 20-year guys, I think theirs happens a little earlier because there's a shorter time to retirement. Here, I think it takes just a little bit longer. And that's just personal observation. I don't have any science to prove that, but
yeah.
it's just personal observation. I think those guys that have a shorter time to get full service retirement, they tend to burn out a little earlier. And the folks that are a 30-year retirement, we're one of the longer ones, takes a little longer because you're like, I'm never going to get there. At that 10-year mark, you're like, never getting there. And
Yeah.
then you look back and it's been 23 years and you're like, oh, that happened pretty quick.
That makes total sense. It really does. I wanted to ask you what you think the key to growth and forward movement and development is so that you can have a long and successful career and you don't burn out. You still have that, forward trajectory within your career.
So unfortunately, I think a lot of that is dependent upon the person.
Mm,
If you have the desire to learn, train, and make yourself better, that's just in you, I think you will go further, be more successful, and have a longer, better career than if you just do the bare minimum and scoot by.
mm,
And there are officers all over the country, I'm sure, that are doing the bare minimum. They're answering their calls, they're doing their job. They have no desire. I think underlying, you have to have the personal drive and desire to make yourself successful. If you individually, if you do not have that, you can make a career out of law enforcement, but you're never going to be super successful. You're never going to advance, through the ranks very far. Um, there is a there's a need for both in law enforcement, in all honesty, because if everybody wanted to train all the time and do all the things, then you wouldn't have enough space for everybody. You couldn't promote. Not everybody can be chief, sergeant, lieutenant at the same time. So we need both sets of folks. Um, it's just a personal desire to do well.
Yeah. I think the topic of motivation has come up a lot, and this idea that motivation is fleeting and you have to have the dedication in order to have that forward trajectory. Like, you have to be dedicated to the training, you have to be dedicated to XYZ, because the motivation might not come. And one of the things that popped in my head when you were talking, and I'm curious what you think, because I'll tell you my opinion. I think that as humans, we like, it's built in us to want to have some sort of enrichment and some sort of growth throughout our life. And maybe that doesn't mean that you want to be chief or want to be in a role of leadership, but I think that there isn't anyone I've met who wants stagnation. There isn't anyone who wants to like feel like they don't have any sort of forward growth in their life. And I've always thought that if you had that why, if you could always connect back to, you know, why you're doing the things that you're doing, why it's important for you to be well, to create that, not the motivation, but the dedication to be able to have some sort of forward trajectory within your life. Do you think that as humans that we that we want growth and not stagnation?
Absolutely, but I don't know that everybody has the
Mm,
desire to do that in their professional life.
right.
I think that a lot of folks they get that forward growth in their personal lives, spiritual lives, whatever, but it doesn't convert over necessarily always to their profession.
Understood.
Um, I think that they're getting fulfillment in personal growth or in life. It may just not be in their career.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, I don't think they're just skating on everything in life. They're not just staying level in all facets of their life. And a lot of folks will, I'm sure you've seen it, talk to folks that have talked about it. They will excel in their professional life, and then their personal life suffers, and that becomes stagnant. So I
Mm,
think that, there's a fine line of as leaders that we have to try to give them the opportunities, encouragement to develop professionally. But I think that as leaders, especially if you have the opportunity, like I do, with a very small crew, I know all their wives' names. I know all their children's names. I know everything that they're willing to share with me about their personal life as well. And I make it a point to say, hey, how's your wife? Hey, your kid had lost their first tooth last week. Everything good? Like
yeah.
having those personal interactions, I think helps me because of my agency size. And I think first line supervisors in larger agencies have that same opportunity to really get to know their folks.
Yeah.
Um, be their friend when you can be their friend, be their boss when you have to be their boss. And there's a difference in can be and have to be, in my opinion. I can be your friend, but sometimes I'm going to have to be your boss.
Yeah.
And there's a very distinct difference there that they understand. We have an understanding in our agency that we can be friends and we can hang out and we maybe have a barbecue and somebody buys a house and we have a housewarming or a baby shower or whatever. We can be friends like that. And then when it comes to the time where I have to be your boss, I'm going to be your boss. And then we're going to go back a couple of days later and we're going to be friends again. It's going to be okay. Um, so I think that that helps me specifically and agencies of my size, having that professional and personal relationship that I know things about them outside of the job that I can use to motivate them at the job.
Yeah, that's a great point. I think that if we're going to say that you guys are human and we're going to take a look at the whole person, then there has to be recognition that there is work life and there is home life. And how
Mhm.
can you support both? You know, how can you make sure that everyone is, I wouldn't say happy. I don't know if you could make everyone happy, but how can you make sure that you're supporting both sides of the coin? I wanted to talk a little bit about, and I remember this actually happening because I work with a few agencies in your area. This was maybe 2 years ago, Hurricane Helene.
So 9 months,
9 months. Okay, so it wasn't that long. Yeah,
9 months.
9 months ago. Um,
Yes,
I have no concept of time anymore, but I
I
do remember this.
understand.
I do remember this happening, and I remember talking to agencies, and they were sending out support and help to you guys. Can you
Mhm.
talk a little bit for anyone who's listening who doesn't know what that was? What happened 9 months ago? And what was your experience with Hurricane Helene?
So September 27th of 2024, the remnants of Hurricane Helene hit Western North Carolina very hard. Um, we had severe flooding, landslides, trees down, no communication for days. It knocked out all cell phone communication, everything. The only way that you could communicate at all with the outside world is if you were somewhere that had a generator and the
Mm,
Wi-Fi was still working. So for about 2 days, you couldn't get really into or out of the town of Banner Elk. It was a Friday. I had been at work since Wednesday. I'd been home about maybe 5 hours since Wednesday, and ended up walking through the woods and coming back to a road that wasn't washed out to walk home to my family on Friday night about 10 o'clock, 11 o'clock.
wow.
Um, yeah, it was a very intense time. You think of hurricanes and you think of flatland and you think of Florida and the coast and all of the things and their water rises and then water goes down. Here in the mountains, the water rises and runs very quickly downhill.
Mm,
Luckily for our community, we are at pretty much the top of the hill. So our water, the lower communities from us got all of their rainwater plus all of our runoff. So they had multiple, feet of water because of their water and then our water on top of it, or chasing it rather. It was very devastating for the whole western 27 counties in the state.
yeah.
Every all 20, the 27 westernmost counties in North Carolina were all disaster areas and are receiving the FEMA assistance and all of the things that go along with disaster.
What did that experience teach you as a leader? Were there any lessons that you learned through that whole thing with wellness or morale or leadership skills?
The I think the biggest thing that I learned is no matter how much experience you have,
Mm,
you're never prepared for everything. I had managed big events, disasters before, all of the things that I thought I knew, some of it was valid that I knew it and we could actually implement that. But the other things that I did that I thought I would be, I know that. I didn't know.
mm,
So it taught me that even after all of this time, I still learn every day on the job. There's things that will come up that I'm like, wow, how do we deal with that? And you take all of your experience and all of your knowledge and come up with a best plan, a best guess almost.
Yeah.
This is the way we're going to move forward. I had employees at the time. I had two patrol officers, myself, and the lieutenant. So half of my staff was here. The other half had no way of getting here. So we were here as long as it took. I had one guy that walked in. He lives very close to town, and it took him about 3 hours to crawl through trees in roadways just to get into work. Um, so I mean, you think you think you've got all the experience and you've got all the knowledge, and then when something new, drastic happens, you're like, wow, I have the knowledge and I have the experience, but don't have it for this. So I take what I've got from knowledge and what I've got from experience, put them together, and we just come up with a plan. Um, so as far as the leadership piece, that would be the thing that I learned that you just take all of your experience and all of your knowledge and the knowledge of people that are your with you, your other employees, your coworkers, and you take all of that knowledge, put it together, and come up with a plan. Just because my title is chief doesn't mean I know everything. I
Mm,
don't. I will ask my employees, hey, this is where I think we should go. Is this good? And do you think this works? Because I have a job title. That's all it is to me. It just means I've been around a long time. I don't think that I know everything there is to know, and I know that I do not know everything there is. So um, I'm a lead from the front, but always take suggestions kind of leader.
yeah.
I my rule is or my word is not law. I'm a different style of leadership, I guess.
I love humility. I love humility. I think that to me, I would prefer that over someone trying to like BS their way through something. And I understand like that there's a level of leadership and confidence that has to come with certain things. But, I had a mentor one time when I was starting in my career, and he said something very similar. He was like, you're never going to know everything. And people are going to expect you to know everything. And that's just not possible. It's not possible for you to know everything, but he said people are going to respect you more if they ask you a question and you say, you know what, I don't know, but I'll find it out, or I'll figure it out, or I'm willing to learn, than to like make something up, to like try to give the appearance that you know when maybe you don't. And so I took that with me through my life is, having that sense of humility and being able to say, you know what, I don't know everything. But I think that's the way we learn and that's the way we grow, right? Because instead of faking it, you're saying, you know what, I don't know. Do you know? And if you don't know, how can we figure it out together? How can we find the answer? Or what are things that we can do to get there or to look at something in a different way? And so I appreciate that approach. And I would imagine that people respect that, that they're like, Chief isn't just like BSing his way through this. He's taking suggestions. He's saying he doesn't know, but he's a learner and he's willing to adapt and to grow.
I hope so. I mean, like I said, I don't claim to know everything there is to know. I think in any job in life in general, when you stop learning, you're in a really bad spot.
Yeah.
You know, you when you stop learning, you're dead, pretty much. I mean,
Yeah. There's the saying, I say it all the time, and I know it sounds so morbid, but I think it's just going to be a spin-off of what you say because I agree. I always say if you're not growing, you're dying. And I don't mean it to be like literal or like morbid, but it's that idea of
sure.
like you're falling back, you're not I think again it goes back to what we said. It's like even if it's not in your professional life, but it's in your professional or in your home life, like how can you continue to learn and grow and progress? I wanted to ask you about resiliency because I would imagine that what you experience, not just in Helene, but throughout your entire career requires a certain amount of resiliency. What does resiliency mean to you? What is your definition of resiliency?
So I think resiliency is just the ability to keep moving forward.
Mm,
In its basic, the most basic way you can put it is resiliency is moving forward, whether it be mentally moving forward, mentally moving past something, moving on in your career, your show. Resiliency is the act of moving forward. In my opinion, that when you stop being resilient, you're stagnant. You're not moving anywhere. You're just there. I
mhm.
think that the ability to move forward, move past, move on is where I would put resiliency in my own mind.
Yeah, I love having these conversations because I think that there are many definitions for a lot of the words that we use. And,
Mhm.
when we talk about wellness, it's like, what is the definition of wellness? And that might look different for everybody. When we talk about resiliency, that might have a number of different definitions. And I think the more we can have conversations like this and try to identify the different facets of what we're talking about, that's only going to give us a greater understanding of what it is, what it could be, and give us different perspectives on things. So I appreciate your definition. One of the definitions I heard that I also really liked was resiliency is the amount of time it takes you to get back to baseline. And that could be on both sides of things, right? So if you get really amped up, how quickly can you come back to that like level field? And then the same thing, if you're really low, how can you get back to that level? And I think that that is forward movement, right? Because like
Sure.
you can't get
Yeah.
stuck up here in this like really heightened state. That's not you moving forward, right? And then if you're like really
Yeah.
stuck and not wanting to do anything, it's the same thing. So how can we get back to that baseline so that you have that trajectory? So I love hearing different definitions of words that we use a lot. So thank you. I wanted to talk a little bit about challenges. I ask this to almost every chief that I talk to is, what are the challenges in wellness? What are we missing? What are things that we could do better, as outside people coming in, but also organizationally? What are some of the challenges that you're seeing, not just within your organization, but I think just as a profession as a whole when it comes to wellness?
So I think a lot of times physical wellness is really important in basic law enforcement training and you're in whatever school you go to. It's a big part of it. There's a physical fitness element to it. And then when folks graduate and start working and sitting in cars and sitting behind desks, that physical wellness goes away. And I think as far as the mental wellness side of it goes, we have got to, as leaders, I think we have got to start breaking down the stigma
Yeah.
of it's you're supposed to be tough. You can't ask for help. We have to get rid of that and encourage our folks to stay mentally well because we don't want to get to a situation where we have an officer who has packed things away for their entire career and then it takes one trigger and they kill themselves.
Yeah.
And it happens. Um, we have to be able to help them. I think as leaders, we have to be able to help them and encourage them to take care of themselves, both physically and mentally. We offer memberships to gyms, to all of our officers, their families, again, trying to make it a whole person deal, not just professionally, but personally. Um, we have the YMCA memberships, but like I said, it's offered to all employees and their families, children, everyone. And then we also do employee assistance where they can see. seek help from a mental professional. Um, and that I think that's important that we as leaders are supportive of those type of options for our folks.
What words of wisdom would you share with the person who's earlier in their career? You know, maybe something that you wish you would have known earlier or something that's helped you along the way. I know that we've had a lot of conversations about leadership and the importance of that, but for the individual, what words of wisdom would you share with them to be more proactive with their wellness?
Um, Take care of yourself outside of a job. Find a hobby, find something you like to do, find a group of friends that are not in law enforcement, because a lot of times you're cop at home or at work, and then you go home and you hang out with your cop buddies, and you're copping all the time, and that's not healthy. You have to have an outlet outside of the job. If you like fishing, or you like hiking, or you like kayaking, or whatever it may be, find that. Find a group of friends that do that and unplug from the job. If you don't unplug from this job, it can consume you. You
Yeah,
have to have an outlet outside of all the cop things.
thank you. Thank you for your words of wisdom. Thank you for your time. I really appreciate you coming on here. I feel like time went by so fast. And so I appreciate you coming on here. And if there's anything else that I missed, I'll let you take the floor.
Thank you for the opportunity. It has gone very quickly. I appreciate the opportunity to be on here with you today.
Of course. We'll keep in touch.
Sounds good.